question, why is the crowd not always right, is one of the most important questions in philosophy, psychology, sociology, and critical thinking. As a teacher, I would explain that humans naturally tend to trust the majority because it feels safe and comforting. When many people believe something, individuals often assume it must be correct. However, history, psychology, and everyday life repeatedly show that the crowd can be mistaken, manipulated, emotional, irrational, or uninformed. Truth is not determined by the number of people who believe something. A belief does not become correct simply because it is popular. Understanding why crowds are not always right is essential for developing independent thinking and avoiding blind conformity. At the most basic level, humans are social beings. Throughout evolution, survival depended heavily on belonging to groups. Early humans who stayed connected to the tribe were more likely to survive than those who were isolated. As a result, the human brain developed a strong desire for acceptance and fear of rejection. This social instinct still exists today. People often agree with the crowd because disagreement can feel uncomfortable or dangerous. In many situations, individuals follow the majority not because they truly believe it is right, but because they fear criticism, isolation, or conflict. One major reason crowds are not always right is groupthink. Groupthink occurs when people in a group prioritize harmony and agreement over critical thinking and honest discussion. Instead of questioning ideas, members suppress doubts to maintain unity. In such situations, irrational decisions can spread quickly because no one wants to challenge the majority. History provides many examples where governments, organizations, and societies made disastrous decisions because people followed the group rather than thinking independently. Another important factor is that crowds are highly emotional. When individuals become part of a large group, emotions spread rapidly. Fear, anger, excitement, nationalism, or panic can influence collective behavior. Crowds often react emotionally rather than rationally. For example, financial bubbles occur when large numbers of people become overly optimistic and invest blindly because everyone else is doing it. Similarly, mass panic can spread during crises, leading people to make irrational decisions. Emotional contagion causes crowds to amplify feelings, sometimes overpowering logic and evidence. Crowds are also vulnerable to manipulation and propaganda. Throughout history, leaders, media, and institutions have influenced public opinion by using emotional messaging, repetition, fear, and misinformation. When people hear the same idea repeatedly from authority figures or large numbers of others, they often accept it without deeply questioning it. Propaganda works especially well on crowds because individuals inside groups tend to think less independently. The desire to belong and conform makes people more vulnerable to manipulation. Another reason crowds are not always right is the illusion of social proof. Humans often assume that if many people believe something, it must be true. This mental shortcut is useful in some situations because it saves time and energy. However, popularity is not evidence of truth. Many false beliefs in history were once accepted by the majority. For centuries, large populations believed incorrect scientific ideas, supported harmful social systems, or rejected important discoveries. If truth depended on majority opinion, scientific progress and social reform would rarely happen. The history of science clearly shows that the crowd can be wrong. Many groundbreaking thinkers were initially rejected or criticized because their ideas challenged popular beliefs. Scientists like Galileo Galilei faced strong opposition because their discoveries contradicted accepted views. At one time, most people believed the Earth was the center of the universe. The majority opinion was wrong, even though it was widely accepted. This demonstrates that truth depends on evidence and reality, not popularity. Crowds also tend to simplify complex issues into emotional or binary choices. Instead of carefully analyzing complicated problems, groups often reduce situations to us versus them, right versus wrong, or good versus evil. This simplification makes it easier for crowds to unite emotionally, but it weakens nuanced thinking. Complex truths often require patience, evidence, and careful reasoning, which crowds do not always encourage. Another psychological reason crowds fail is diffusion of responsibility. In large groups, individuals often feel less personally responsible for their actions. People may behave in ways they normally would not when acting alone. This can lead to mob behavior, online harassment, riots, or unethical decisions. The individual's moral judgment becomes weaker because responsibility feels shared among the group. Fear of social rejection is another powerful force. Many people remain silent even when they privately disagree with the majority. Psychologists call this conformity pressure. Experiments by psychologist Solomon Asch showed that individuals often give obviously wrong answers simply because everyone else in the group gives the same answer. This demonstrates how social pressure can overpower personal judgment. Social media has intensified crowd influence in modern society. Platforms are designed around likes, shares, trends, and viral content. People constantly see what the majority appears to support, which creates pressure to conform. Algorithms amplify emotional and popular content, making crowds even more influential. As a result, misinformation, outrage, and extreme opinions can spread rapidly because people assume that popularity equals truth. Crowds are also limited by incomplete knowledge. Most individuals do not deeply research every issue. Instead, they rely on headlines, social influence, emotions, or trusted authorities. When large numbers of uninformed people repeat the same idea, it can create the illusion of truth even when the information is inaccurate. Repetition increases familiarity, and familiarity often feels convincing. Another important reason the crowd is not always right is that humans are affected by cognitive biases. Biases are mental shortcuts that help people make quick decisions, but they can also distort reality. Confirmation bias causes people to seek information that supports their existing beliefs while ignoring contradictory evidence. When many people share the same bias, the entire crowd can become trapped in collective misunderstanding. However, it is important to understand that crowds are not always wrong either. Groups can sometimes produce wisdom, cooperation, and accurate collective judgments. Under certain conditions, when individuals think independently, have diverse perspectives, and base decisions on evidence, the wisdom of crowds can be valuable. The problem arises when crowds stop thinking critically and become driven by emotion, conformity, fear, or manipulation. As a teacher, I would emphasize that independent thinking does not mean rejecting every popular opinion automatically. It means evaluating ideas based on evidence, logic, and careful reasoning rather than blindly following the majority. A wise person is willing to question both the crowd and themselves. Independent thinkers ask important questions. Why do people believe this? What evidence supports it? Could the majority be mistaken? Are emotions influencing judgment? Critical thinking is the strongest defense against blind conformity. People who think critically are less likely to follow harmful trends or accept false information simply because it is popular. They are willing to stand alone if evidence supports their position. Throughout history, social progress often began with individuals who challenged the crowd and defended truth despite opposition. Courage is also essential because questioning the crowd can be uncomfortable. Humans naturally fear rejection and criticism. However, intellectual courage means being willing to think independently even when it is unpopular. Many important moral and scientific advances happened because individuals refused to blindly follow the majority. In conclusion, the crowd is not always right because human groups are influenced by emotions, conformity, fear, social pressure, propaganda, incomplete knowledge, and cognitive biases. Popularity does not guarantee truth. History repeatedly shows that majorities can make serious mistakes while minorities or individuals may hold correct ideas supported by evidence. While crowds can sometimes be wise, they become dangerous when critical thinking disappears. Therefore, the goal is not to blindly reject the crowd or blindly follow it, but to develop independent thinking, question assumptions, examine evidence carefully, and seek truth beyond popularity.